So, oh, damn! It went live and it didn't tell me. Now, I got the red button just now. All right. So we have developers of two awesome PHP apps, and both are task runners. So, I have a set of questions that I wanted to ask you guys, and I hope this will get us on the road to more questions. So, I think that this is the most logical one, and I should probably introduce you before that. So yes, we have Mike Fisher, who's in charge of Task PHP, and you got the pretty slick vendor name for packages, which is task/stuff, which is awesome.
Yeah, that worked out well.
Yes, I think you had to register your package probably on the second day this came out. Like Composer came out, because when I tried to get some packages, I had to come up with such random names, but I had to use the thesaurus for like 5 times. All right.
Naming is always a challenge.
Yes. So and also we have Aaron with his builder. I'm just gonna call it builder because I can't pronounce 4
That's right, actually.
letters in a row. Yeah. Yeah. So I kind of used builder in one of my projects. I haven't used Task PHP, sadly. So I'll probably be a bit more knowledgeable about that project, but I hope Mike will provide more info on his stuff. So why did you guys decide to do a task runner of all the possible things?
Because I hate Thing.
Yes.
That was my second question.
So in my last company, we were using Ant for our Jenkins server, and I just hated the way that you configure it. I don't like XML configs. They're really a pain to use. And coming from Symphonyland, I'm a pretty big fan of YAML. So I wanted to build a task runner that had a lot cleaner configuration than Ant, and I wanted it built in PHP because I didn't want to have to install dependencies for Java or for Node. And then while I was building it, I kind of had the idea that, you know what, that this could also do what Grunt and kind of Gulp, not really the piping stuff, but it could kind of replace those as well to work with front-end developers. So that's kind of where I went with that.
Actually, the first impression that I got when I, just went to the site for the first time, whenever that was that it was more of a tool for like deployment, sort of saying, like building the project, once, and then because it didn't give this notion of a task runner, especially the construction machine that I don't know the name of, some sort of bulldozer. It looks more like something that you would like Ant, yes, essentially, that you would build stuff, not like a cron tool, sort of thing. So what about you, Mike?
It starts exactly the same way. Using Thing at work, not enjoying using XML for configuration.
But you didn't go the YAML way. I know
no,
that.
so the idea there was that PHP is a scripting language. Why use config at all? Why not just use the programming language? I think the other experiment with configuration-driven stuff with this is Grunt, which suffers, I think, in a similar way to Thing, in that for small, simple things it works well, but Grunt files get out of hand pretty quickly. And so you can manage that with Node, but yeah. So I think again, similar inspiration with Grunt and Gulp, and for the same way, not wanting to have to install dependencies, I wanted all those fancy tricks that those tools gave you, but in PHP land, why bother installing Node for a PHP app just to do build time stuff? That would be true of Java as well, like Aaron said, or anything else. So it was also about it being pure PHP.
I remember my first time when I saw Ping. It was Ping. So, it was like, the configuration is like one of those things that give you like a headache instantly. You just, you see like 2 pages of XML and you just that's
Yeah.
you know that there's like 8 hours of your work gonna go out the window just trying to understand whatever this is. So
Makes me want to gouge my eyes out.
well, actually, the first time I saw Symphony, I had the same feeling too. I just went like, oh, the config, yeah, oh, that's gonna be fun. But happily I got over that. Um, well, now being an open source developer myself, because that's why I've been hated on over at RPHP because I'm promoting PHP too much. So they say, well, I'm not doing that too much right now, but it's sort of a meme. Everybody remembers me for doing that. So, well, when do you find the time? Actually, how many hours a week does it usually take for you to, to develop stuff that's not related to your work? Because for me, I usually come home at like, I don't know, like 7 p.m. Then I spend some time with my GF, and then after she goes to bed, like at midnight, about now, I would start like coding and writing tests until about 4 a.m. and then I would oversleep and come up with a story while I'm late at work. So, uh, what's the process for you guys? Because it's usually it's really hard to find some free time, to do stuff like this.
Yeah, I've always found that as a challenge. I mean, the biggest challenge for me is like making sure I don't burn out on a project. So I've been working on a couple different projects. I have my work, which I spend. I spend the necessary time on my work. Luckily, I get to work from home, so when I want, I can switch projects. But I'm also fortunate to have a girlfriend that is in law school, so a majority of her time is spent in books, which grants me a lot of time to work on my hobbies.
When does she graduate?
Not for another 3 years. So.
Hey!
So you still have some time to build something great, but then.
Yeah, exactly.
So, oh, sorry.
Yeah, so it really comes down to like finding out how I want to manage my time. If I want to work on my open source projects this week, or if I want to play video games or whatever, but I usually find a pretty good balance. So.
Mike?
I have not a long commute. It's about half an hour, 40 minutes backwards and forwards to work for me on the train, which I'm on the computer for. I do some stuff in the evenings, and most of the time, I'd say one of the weekend days, average sort of spread out over the weekend, I'm spending on the computer. I'm starting to pick up more freelance stuff as well now, so that will be less open source stuff and more work. But at the same time, I also a lot of the task specifically came out of a problem at work to have a solution to. So quite a lot of it also has been written in the office when I probably should have been working on other things. But in the same way,
Your boss might be watching this later on.
Yeah. They benefit. They benefit. Yeah.
All right. As long as as long as they benefit, that's probably cool. And since we've touched, the amount of time, because that's another thing that's been coming up, because especially at my work, and that's a bit not related to task building, but more to like organizing time. I've been hearing it from like from clients a lot that you shouldn't waste your time on writing unit tests because just get the work done as fast as possible. So yeah, I heard that a lot. And usually we kind of have this negotiation procedure where we explain why it's important. So how do you guys feel? Because especially for Mike, when you say that you have like an hour a day, you travel here and there, and then wouldn't then the idea of writing like tests for your for the project feel like wasting some percentage of that, because for me actually I write tests about like 700% of the time that it took me to write the actual code, because I have this perfectionist idea of having like 100% code coverage, and I want to mark everything, and I usually delete half the stuff I've written every time I can't fit it into a model. So how do you feel on that?
I think it's important to try and not separate writing code and writing tests. They're
Oh, so
one and
you're
the same
pro
thing.
TDD.
I don't know. Lots of people interpret that in different ways, I guess. As I know exactly what you mean though about spending the same amount of time, if not more time, writing tests. I think something I'm learning recently is that testing at a higher level, at a behavioral level, is more useful than right into the nitty gritty of objects, especially when you're working in stuff the way you tend to with open source, where there's not a huge amount of planning. You're more writing code and refactoring as you go. Having a test suite that lets you know that you haven't fucked it up and that it all still works is extremely valuable. But having a test suite so coupled to a particular implementation that whenever you change code you have to change tests is sort of pointless, The test should change if the behavior changes, but the code can change within that in a whole bunch of different ways.
Well, you could still argue that you could put you could test interfaces like just the public methods and stuff, so that the behavior doesn't really change, just the interface does. But I get your point really. So how would you suppose? So because actually when I go to Task PHP, it tells me So I just don't want to have this. It says that you have 100% code coverage, though.
Yes.
Now you're saying that it would be much better if you didn't.
No, so I think it makes sense that. So I used to say that a sort of 100% code coverage is the minimum you'd expect from a test suite, right? Because it should cover the whole code. But I think the other thing to take from Task is that I've been using PHP Spec, which is the first time I've used that tool rather than PHP Unit. And I think you end up with the coverage because you're writing specs almost in a TDD where you write specs first which describe behavior and then code comes afterwards. So it's quite difficult not to have that coverage, if you know what I mean. Although there's still plenty of I just screw the tests and spend a good few hours just hard coding and then do the tests again afterwards, because sometimes it's coming around in my head so quickly that I need to get it out, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I think it's important though that with TDD, one of the cornerstones of it is the reason you want to do it is it lets you plan out what your app is supposed to look like at the beginning. So it forces you to think, this is how I want the entire application to be modeled, and it prevents you from refactoring later. And I finally was able to develop an app fully TDD and a little bit of BDD a couple months ago, and I spent a lot of time doing tests, but I never had to go back and refactor, and that having the ability to not need to go back and refactor is really priceless, especially when you're in when you have business requirements that, when you're going through and they change their business requirements, you won't have to change as much if you plan out the app from the beginning, because when you're planning out the app and you're writing these tests, you can go, well, what is this supposed to do? What is this supposed to do? Instead of when you get there, asking the question and then having to go back and refactor shit because it didn't work the way you thought it would from the beginning. So I tried to do TDD build, but it kind of gets into one of those situations where you can't stop yourself from skipping the test really quick because you have so much on your mind. You just want to rush through it. But I think as much as I can, I try to get through and write the tests. But as a sad point, tests right now don't actually work with Builder. I had added embedded composer. I had added embedded composer and it broke all my tests, so I need to go back in and make sure that they work now. So
That's a pity. But here's a question. You're saying that TDD is great since you can have all the business logic defined before you actually start implementing it, like defined in terms of contract sort of thing with tests. But what would be like the largest possible project that could be built with TDD? And the idea I have is that our minds are sort of limited things, and create. If I sat you down and I told you like come up with an architecture for say like Facebook, like in its entirety, it would be pretty because well, I know I couldn't do that because I was trying. I actually at one time I went into like my Git stats and I took a look at the deletion addition ratio sort of thing. So I tend to delete most of the code that I write like every week sort of thing and then redo it. So solely because it's usually that what I've been working right now is like an ORM for the framework. So the idea of what I want to achieve changes like after 2 weeks. After it's like I think I just don't have the approach to think
yeah, and
ahead of
TDD
what
is
I.
like TDD is supposed to solve that because it forces you to plan out what you want your app to do before you even write it. So it really it prevents you from needing to go back and delete stuff that you don't really want anymore. And BDD will do that too. It's just BDD does it from more of a feature standpoint, and TDD does it more from a application design standpoint. And I think that's actually a little bit more applicable in open source when you want people to, well, not open source, but for example, I don't know if either of you have heard of Gush, but when Gush, in order to, well, Gush is, okay, so Gush is basically a way to interact with VCS systems like GitHub or Bitbucket or GitLab or something like that from the command line. And in order to support new providers like Bitbucket or GitHub or GitLab, there needs to be an adapter written. And if you use TDD and you make sure that your adapter setup is proper from the get-go, then it makes developing the other adapters a lot easier. And without that TDD, there's going to be a ton of refactoring when they add a new feature to an adapter, but they realize they need to add that same functionality to the core, so that there's always going to be refactoring. And I mean, if you do TDD from the start, things like Gush, it's going to be a lot cleaner from the get-go.
All right. So I have another nice question that I actually came up with it when I was installing Builder just to take a look at it like yesterday because I wanted to refresh my memory sort of thing. So one of the dependencies that I noticed that it downloaded for me was doctrine annotations. So that's obviously something not that it's directly dependent on, and it was a dependency of a dependency. And that's one of the problems that I think is with Composer right now. That you get dependencies that you won't ever use, and your task managers, both of them, would probably, especially I know that Builder is installable globally for Composer, and that's basically one of the default setups that you have to install it like in the one general folder. So how do you feel on what's your feelings on the decline of Peer, which was like the centralized sort of package system, which I actually kind of liked because I liked it the way in Python, because I developed some stuff in Python sometime before, and I kind of liked that I just go and easy install that stuff and easy install that stuff, and I have that in all projects. And then kind of a Node came with like npm, and there's small package managers for that. But the idea is, which of those do you like more? Like the centralized idea, where you install the package once and you just have it on your system, or the Composer dependencies per project?
I very much enjoy having dependencies per project. I think that's a great thing about Composer out the box. That I've done some Python work as well, and messing around with virtualenv and RVM for the same thing with Ruby. That your dependencies are isolated to one project, I think, is great. And
it allows. I mean, the big thing for that is it allows different versions, like different projects on your machine can run on different versions.
Yeah.
For example.
Yeah, that's the coolest. Yeah, that's the obvious plus.
Yeah.
So you're thinking Pure is dead, like forever, and you're gonna never see it again? What's?
I have no idea. I mean, in a way, NPM's gone a step even further, right? In the way that so two of your dependencies can depend on the same library but require different versions, and that can exist within one set of project dependencies because of the way it traverses node modules directories. I mean, so if you're looking for a trend, the new ones tend to follow the per project basis. I don't know whether that means the centralized way.
Well, yeah, because what about like modules? Because Pure had this it kind of came with Spackle, which could also compile stuff for you, like the models for PHP, and so I haven't actually heard about any. Well, that's obviously not gonna happen per project, but do you think that Packle is gonna go die quietly together with Spear and just give way to stuff? Yes.
Yeah, I think it's going away.
All right.
There's not much. I mean, there's not much push for it. Like it's feeling a lot like Pair at this point, where like the only reason people are still using it is because that people have to use it. But as stuff starts moving over to things like Composer, I think the necessity for Peckle is going to go out the door, just like Pair. I mean, Symfony just announced that they're no longer supporting Pair after PHP Unit dropped the support, and considering that PHP Unit was the most installed package with Pair, and is probably just one step away from the biggest package on Peckle stopping its support to kill Peckle. So
I think there's been a few pull requests on Composer as well about installing extensions, not just being able to list them as dependencies, but how you would go about installing them. I think people are starting to think about that now. And tools like PHPM have allowed you to isolate setups of extensions, again on a per project basis, in a similar way to you would do with things like virtualenv. I
have no idea how they're going to do it.
No.
Well, to me it seems like a good idea. Since in Composer you still define stuff like depending on the extensions that are installed. So if you're going to do that anyway and require like specific version of PHP and require like specific extensions, like let's say Mongo, so it might as well compile it for you. But I just hope that this is gonna work correctly one day, because
the challenge for Composer is going to be like I don't know if they'll be able to like compile an extension for a particular project that it pretty much has to be a system-wide thing.
Well, particular project probably not gonna work, especially with stuff like it's obviously not gonna work for a PHP mod PHP because it loads the
PHP itself would have to change.
You could probably do it with like multiple PHP FPM instances that listen on different ports, and
yeah, that just sounds dumb. Sounds like a bad idea.
Yeah, so at that point I would probably just buy a new VPS. just so that I wouldn't do it. So another topic is HHVM and hack and stuff. And have you touched it?
I've touched HHVM like a couple times, but I haven't really played around with it too much. To be honest, I'm not a huge fan of hack. I wish they would have. I don't know. I don't really care for hack. I guess I'll just leave it at that.
I think there's some nice features. a few that are coming through in 5.6 and the dreaded 6.0 as well. Things like collections, I think, would be really nice. And a lot of the guys that I work with are very much against the notion of being tied to Facebook in some way, but I don't really know where that comes from. I don't see you're tied to the PHP core team any more or less, or in a different way than you would be to Facebook.
Well, the problem there is you're tied to. I mean, you're hoping that a business will continue to develop a framework, and there's nothing that says that the Facebook team is going to keep developing it. They could just one day decide that they're done. And the other problem is they're fiscally responsible for their company. So if hack stops to make sense fiscally, then they have to stop.
I'd agree, but then it's not closed source anymore, though, right? So you'd have to assume that if it took off well and if people used it and if Facebook wanted to dump it, there'd be a load of people ready to take it over.
Well, do you know what the license is on hack?
No.
Oh, I had no idea too, actually. Never saw it.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Because that could be relatively important.
Let's check. Hackling. So, But I mean, well, I'm looking for the license because obviously it's alright. It's on GitHub, so probably there's a license file somewhere. But like the idea of introducing a lot of those stuff that they are actually trying to. Alright, the PHP license version 3.01. So I think it comes under the same what? It appears it may come under the same license. Oh, now they have like license.php, license.zend. So yeah. Oh, there's also HHVM is licensed under the PHP and Zend license except as otherwise noted. The hack type hacker is I saw it's PHP, so same, basically same thing. But the idea of actually having all those, like turning PHP into Java, that means, that if you're gonna introduce like forced types into PHP, static type. If you're gonna introduce like things that you would like collections. Why not? It seems like the idea is that the PHP community as a whole was this like this child that was learning stuff that was simple, like in like 2000s, like whenever it was, and now that kind of child grew up.
Yeah.
And it feels like it looks like at the shiny motorcycles people are riding, and it's trying to stick like a small motor to its old like bike with 3 wheels. So it would be like the cool guys, but I mean, like when people are saying that, how awesome we're gonna get collections, we're gonna get this stuff and that stuff, I'm just like, I can write Java, because it's.
Well, I think yes and no. I mean, the difference between like adding this stuff to PHP and just using Java is there's a lot more in Java. And
yes, that's actually
are slow. So I mean, when you're adding these things to PHP, you're making it more of an adult language, I guess. You're adding features that are very common in other programming languages, like static typing, things that I think PHP has wanted for a while, and things that I would love to see in PHP, but at the same time, it still is different enough from Java where it's not slow, it's not a pain in the ass to develop with, and doesn't use XML regularly.
So do you think dynamic typing is a bad thing?
Yes and no. I think having the ability to dynamically type is very good in certain situations. I also believe, though, that enforcing static typing where it's helpful is extremely important as well. I've seen a couple discussions where, I mean, like for an example, a function shouldn't be able to return a dynamic type. A function should return a specific thing, and then if you want that function to return a different type, you should have a different function for it.
Oh, you reminded me of a Holly war that I was in on one of the farms where people were arguing about. So I can't remember the actual setup, but the idea was that that was on Yi farms. Yi. You know that framework.
Yeah.
So, because on my quest to prove that all other frameworks than mine were
Yeah, that's what I'm doing here tonight, by the way.
yes, I dabbled into their cow code, and there was like thing like this. So there was like some function that was searching for some file, and it would either return a file, or it would return false if the file was not found, or it would return null when there was an error, and it would throw an exception when there was some kind of a fatal error.
Yeah, that's a lot.
I agree. I
would
agree
say
with Aaron on return type hinting. I think that I strongly suspect that will come into PHP quite soon. There was an RFC, I think only a few weeks ago, that made a lot of noise on Twitter with people saying it would be nice. I think that's the kind of thing that will make it into PHP. I personally really like the sort of compromise between, it talked about comparison to things like Java. I think PHP's OO implementation is nice. It allows you to enforce some things and give you flexibility in different ways as well. I would agree that going towards something like Java wouldn't be that nice, but I also agree with the notion that there's some cool things. Oh, the type hinting thing, the same way that is all just bad design, right? Because you could just have your functions return one thing.
Yeah.
How about?
To be honest, I really, really, really wish you could type in scalar type. That's all I want.
Yes.
Yeah, I wonder why it was so hard to implement this in their core, because from what I know, sorry?
I feel like it's probably because PHP doesn't really treat scalar types as objects.
Yes,
like
but
literally scalar types.
you see that how the type hinting, sort of like the enforcing of types, was implemented in PHP. It basically runs instance of, like assert instance of your parameters that you pass to the function. So if this, so they kind of could just code that it would just assert like is string. That's the same thing as they do the assertion.
Yeah, they could take it a step further. I mean, if they turn strings into the way that Java handles strings, we could start getting into Java's kind of dot notation on strings of being able to do like quote string to lower with the arrow, and I honestly think that would actually be a huge gain for PHP, because I mean you're getting further away from procedural, and you're moving it closer to an object-oriented state of mind, and I think that's really important. So that's another one of the things that I'd love to see in PHP.
The argument that I heard of, though, is that if type hinting was enforced like in some sort of like a static way, so that there was like an analyzer that analyzed your code, like before, like for example, when you start PHP FPM, or before like it's cached for the first time, the opcode it would analyze that the function is called properly, and then just forget about it. That would be nice, but from what I see right now, actually, because I'm not that good in like PHP internals, but it seems that it does that instance of check like on every function call that you make. So like since obviously it can't do it at compile time, because there's no compile time, and every function can be called from any part of your code, and that's why we have stuff like call user function and stuff. So like when you imagine like there's, so for Symfony, I would say that I would estimate that there's like around, well, not less than 1,000 probably those assertions going on each page load, because you know you have to initialize a lot of classes. There's a lot of dependency injection going on there. So I think there should be the dynamic languages should find a better way of implementing this. Either that, or there should be a way for us, like as developers, to compile PHP into opcodes manually, and then just deploy those in production. This would be
Well,
so much.
I think that's what hip hop is, isn't it?
I don't think if you
Compiles
can
PHP,
compile
and
it
that's what.
separately from the code. I think it compiles it in the same like idea as like APC compiles your stuff in the background. So it can pick. I don't know, because as I said, internals are kind of not my thing. Uh, So yeah. So if you were choosing a language right now, knowing like all those memes are like PHP is double quote hammer and stuff like that, would you still pick PHP like today? If like imagine, because I have this problem right now where I actually wanted to get my girlfriend into programming a bit. So so I'm a very sarcastic person, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna learn you some stuff, but it's not that's not the proper way. 'Cause that's all right. So here is PHP. Yeah. All right. So like let's divide stuff by 0. Oh, you see, this is a fatal error. Oh, that's generated by xdebug because I had that extension. Yeah, but that should be an exception. In normal life, that should be an exception. If you were using a framework, it would throw an exception. But since I'm just running a function, it's an error. Yeah, but there is this function that you can use, like register exception handler, error handler. Yeah, register error handler, and you can throw exceptions yourself and do stuff like that. And she's like, why wasn't that done? Like every framework does this. Like we still have the errors that no one uses or wants. So if you were choosing a language today, and since we have all this stuff like Go, which I kind of liked, and JavaScript is now being like server run, and you could like just use Node for everything. So would you still learn PHP if you were just fresh out of, I don't know, not school, wherever you started programming?
2 years ago, I would have said no. I would not have used PHP. But given the recent changes in PHP, given the addition of
Mhm.
Composer specifically, I think PHP is really on an upswing. Despite all these articles saying it's Facebook revitalizing PHP, I honestly think it's Composer.
Mhm.
I would definitely say that PHP would be one of the languages that I would definitely keep in mind for a language I'd be learning right now. The only other languages I would really look at right now would be Go and
Mhm.
one of the C's if I didn't want to do web development. So,
You wouldn't do web development. Well, why wouldn't you like web development in C's? Like I think like C
because I
is, yeah.
mm,
Sorry.
I have a bad taste in my mouth from ASP and
Oh, not C
Microsoft.
sharp. I meant like double plus. That's you have your OOP. You have basically
It's
whatever you have. You could even keep the C functions that you love so much from PHP.
Yeah, I mean, yes, you could do web development with one of the C's, but to be honest, it'd be easier using PHP or Go or
Mm.
JavaScript or whatever. As much as I
I
don't like
found
Node.
once, because that was a fun thing. Once I found a framework, a web framework written in pure C, and I thought, wow, this was an excellent, an exercise in futility, because
Well, it's one of those things where I think the guy just proved that he could do it, and then
yes, the guy proved that's fine. It ran fast, so I there that you have to give him that, but I probably I wouldn't go for it. I like C, but imagine like because there was a database thingy there, and imagine like where you have to define a structure like a pointer to a database record. that's that's just something that's never like in my mind when I'm thinking of database or RAM, like, oh, pointers.
Yeah, I think pointers would be the reason why I wouldn't want to do web development.
Actually, a fun fact, for one of my PHP interviews at one of the jobs that I applied for some time ago, they asked, the only question they asked me, this was for a PHP developer position, they asked me questions on C pointers, like where would this pointer go, and I was like, oh, good that I learned C in school. And they didn't ask me anything else. They said they have this policy that if a person can understand C, is pointers that they can program. That was.
Sounds fair.
Sorry, Mike, because I think I got into a very two-sided conversation with Aaron on all of this. The direction PHP is going and stuff. So, what's your thoughts on this? And which language would you pick? If
I don't know. So the last company I worked for, I was writing PHP and I hated it. I was Pythonista and I was determined that would be the way it would go. And I spent a long time convincing them we should rewrite all of our code in Python. And I just got them to agree, and then I left. No, sorry. No, I left before it was rewritten, as in, I managed to get to the point where they agreed it was a good idea.
I searched over projects and labs, so you guys have fun with Python. I'm just...
No. So I'd managed to wear them down, and then I moved on. And at the new company, I'm very much enjoying PHP. I haven't thought about anything else since I've been working there. So I think I'd probably pick PHP, but at the same time, I think it probably really doesn't matter. I think knowing what's rubbish about a language means that you'd know it well, and if you moved into something that seems shiny now and doesn't have the same issues that, for example, PHP has, give it a couple of years to learn it well, and you'd find out what's crap about that one too.
What would you say is shiny?
On the other side.
Yeah. So I think I'd rather have built up a good base of experience with a small group of languages and carry that through a career. Whether or not PHP will still exist in 10 years and whether or not none of us will have jobs remains to be seen. Maybe Facebook will just run the world by then.
What about if you were a professor at a university of sorts and you've... Alright, not university... wherever. So your job is to teach people programming and you can pick a language to do it. Would you pick PHP? Like if... Like you would basically define the language that 80% of those people would continue using.
No, I'd pick Python.
You'd pick Python still.
Yeah,
I missed the question. What was the question again? Sorry.
If you were so you like PHP, but you know all its ups and downs. But if you were a professor at university and your job was to like guide a computer course and like teach people's language, would you still teach them PHP, knowing all of this?
Honestly, to school, no, I teach them Java. I think Java teaches really good fundamentals for programming. But like, in advanced class,
because I have a question for Java purists, because they introduced a thing that's going to be default implementation for interfaces, where you can basically define so basically you turn your interfaces into traits, but not really, because traits in PHP can have properties like while Java interfaces can have just implementations that don't rely. So you can have an add method that adds to numbers, and you can have implementation for that, but it can't use anything else practically. So it's not an interface, arguably, anymore. It's not a contract because it defines the implementation. So, and now the question comes: what do you think of traits in PHP? Because that was a long approach to this question. Like,
I think
traits
are nice. I'm not sure they were implemented in the best possible way. But to be fair, that's not really a fault of the guys who created it. It's more of a fault of PHP and the way that it's structured. I
Have
think
you
if
used
PHP was
those?
structured straight traits
Yes.
all the time. I love traits.
Oh,
There are just a few idiosyncrasies that I think would have been better if the language was meant to have them from the beginning, so to speak.
Which would those be?
I don't like, so when you have like multiple traits that have like the same methods, I don't like the way that you have to define
Which one is named
which ones are which, and the fact that you can rename the methods is all fascinating.
That's because now it doesn't really define an interface, because you could argue that those Java interfaces with implementations would be those traits actually, but now when you check that the class inherits a trait, you still can't be sure that it has the method that the trait has. So it's like, you still have to, you still have to define an interface for the trait, so that you would implement it. So that's what I disliked, and that's why I looked at them and I thought like, I'm still going to be using composition in all those classes, like just plain old composition. That's
there are also a couple situations where I wish that a trait could implement in the interface. There are a couple situations where that would be nice.
Yeah.
But I understand why that didn't.
Why? Because that's well, I mean,
it's not a class.
Well, it's still if it could enforce its own like methods, at least you could say like this trait, but if it exists in a class, the class must have these methods without renaming those. So at least that sounds weird. Yeah.
It is a little strange, so I guess
that sounded better in my head than in my mouth. So, what do you think, Mike?
I haven't found a huge amount of use for traits yet. I think we've used them in a couple of situations where I don't think it was the best way to go. You know what? Actually, the nicest use of traits I've seen recently was in Robo, which was the other task runner.
Yes, I couldn't get the hold of those guys, sadly, actually, because I wanted to have them here, but sorry.
No, I thought that would have been cool, but so that was a nice approach. That was that you defined a class, and then you could import functionality into it with traits. I quite like that. So sounds like you guys have much more experience with that than I do.
Well, I have a lot of experience avoiding it, because, as I said, I kind of...
Just with traits, like I say, I've not used them that much. I get them, I've just not had a reason to use them yet.
Alright.
Maybe that's because I don't know how you're supposed to use them, and I've missed a bunch of golden opportunities.
I think I had one reason where I wanted to use traits, but like one place was when I did a query builder, and there are all these types of queries. For example, like you have an insert query and you have like an update query. So insert query shouldn't have some methods, but all right, I'm gonna come up with a better example.
I've actually got a solid one that I've used in the past with entities using Doctrine and Symfony. Our entities, some of them had insert user, update user, some of them had insert date, update date, some of them had like things like this, and we would turn those methods inside the entity into traits. So the methods or the entities that needed those columns would use those traits, the particular traits, and because not every entity used all of the traits, it didn't really make sense to do an extend, but more of a horizontal inheritance. So that was one situation where it actually made a lot of sense.
Actually, how I went around that with the query builder thing, I kind of had this one class that had a lot of those methods, and then there were classes that wrapped around it, and they would basically proxy calls only to those methods that were allowed for that class. So like cherry picking sort of thing. You have like a big basket and you cherry pick method. I didn't like that solution either. By the way, I deleted that too. So I'm gonna be thinking of something new this after this talk. um, right. So another thing that I think that open source is kinda is important for open source is that how often do you guys get pull requests and the quality of those pull requests, and how often do you accept those said pull requests? For people?
I like
Go
I
on, you
like to
go.
accept. I usually like to accept pretty frequently. I mean, as long as the pull request follows the contributing guidelines,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of fits the idea of moving forward with the framework in its current structure. Otherwise, like it depends on the discussion that goes with the framework, or not the framework, the repository. But I work a lot with Luis Cordoval. And he likes to submit a lot of pull requests to all of my projects. So I guess it happens more frequently than normally without his awesome help on the projects. But I mean, more often than not, I do accept pull requests. So
Mike?
I'm fairly new to having things out in open source, to be honest. So I do a lot of code review at work, but in an open source environment, I've not had much experience with that yet. So the pull requests are fantastic for our typos, which is always nice when you spend a lot of time working hard on something and the only thing anybody gives a shit about changing is where you spelt something wrong.
Yes. I kind of thought that, I had this idea that there are people on GitHub that are solely working on fixing like typos, so they could have like this huge list of repositories contributed to. um, but Aaron, you
luckily, you
mentioned.
have added a bot to do that.
But you mentioned guidelines and rules, so I actually haven't checked those out, and I probably should. Like, what rules do you have? Like, do you have like some strict, not that strict? Do you require tests for?
I just posted it into the chat, but basically,
Yeah,
um,
cool. I'm just gonna
uh,
click.
the contributing guidelines that I have are basically saying what branch that you should. This one is actually very similar to Symphony's, I believe. I think that's where I pulled it from. But it basically says the coding style that I'm trying to follow. But as far as like tests and stuff, I should actually probably add that. So thank you for adding that. But yes, I would want to require tests, or not require, but urge tests.
Well, I kind of required tests at some point, but that because usually the response that I get is that I haven't written tests before. Sorry. And I'm usually like, all right, I'm just gonna write the test for it myself.
To be honest, though, that's actually a really good spot to say, well, here's a good opportunity to write tests.
Well, you don't want to discourage people, because from my point, I know that someone spent a lot of time because someone basically did my job for free, and this thing kind of works. So that he did. So especially for simple stuff like someone added a few methods or added a few parameters, and it works. So it works just by looking at it. Just some simple stuff. And because for me, I always try to be I try to encourage people if they do stuff for me. That's effective.
Yeah.
So I just never could refuse a pull request, even if it required me just like.
Well, I wouldn't turn down the pull request just because it didn't have tests, but I would definitely urge them to write tests, and if they needed help with it, I would guide them through it. But I mean, it should be a learning experience for everyone involved. One of the important features of open source software is like everyone is learning. So.
So what about actually? What was it? So I see you obviously have a PSR2 because that's the stuff right now. Or do you? PHP Fig. You said that you follow PHP Fig coding standards. You didn't say which.
All of them.
Yeah, cool. So Did you like? Cause I've taken a huge part in like tabs versus spaces holy war at some time. So do you
I hate spaces.
did you have to switch
Yes.
to PSR2?
Well, not on this project. This project started fully PSR2 compliant, but a lot of my older projects did follow PSR2 relatively close. There were a
Mm-hmm.
couple changes, like a space before the parenthesis, no spaces inside parentheses, and tabs versus spaces. I'm a big tab fan, um, just
Yes,
because.
just
Uh,
because.
well, I
Just
used Vim a lot, so having to go through all of the spaces
well,
makes things
yeah,
a pain in the
it's
ass.
a much more comfortable button. It's
Yeah,
just
that too. Um, but luckily, PHP Storm makes it pretty easy to switch between tabs and spaces. I just wish that in PHP Storm it would treat tabs as spaces more friendly. There's a
hmm
couple issues with that, but I know there are Vim plugins to treat four spaces as tabs in all situations.
I had this find and replace in files feature that I've been using in my editor. So
Well, luckily,
Mike, you. Oh, sorry.
luckily PHP Storm is pretty nice to just be able
Yeah.
to reformat your entire project.
Well, actually, you would be surprised what I used to develop PHP code in. I'm just gonna let Mike talk, and then I'll talk about your favorite editors because that was one of the questions. Just gonna skip to that. So Mike, PSR standards for code. Did they come naturally to you, or because it was a huge? Because basically my standards before writing, I usually standardize like I kind of I had standards, but I kind of came from C, so all my standards were like like the total inversion of PSR2, like snake case, tabs, brackets on the same line or wherever, just not like PSR2. So Mike, since you come from
I was
Python, that.
I was pretty close to PSR2 just when I started writing PHP.
Mhm.
So it was probably a year, 18 months ago, something like that. I started with PSR2, and everything in my new job is PSR2 now, and task is as well. So I think so camel case was fine. I think the thing that tripped me up over and over again was dropping opening braces.
Yeah.
But I too use Vim, and I have some nice standards checking and syntax checking stuff in
Mhm.
there. And before too long, it's second nature. Although I am spaces versus tabs, but I really don't think it makes that much of a difference, does it? As long as it's the same throughout the file, I really don't think it matters.
So, as I said, what about editors? So I can guess that Aaron uses PHP Storm because I heard another phrase of that from him. So what do you use, Mike?
I use Vim.
Oh, you're. Did you kill the neighbor that uses Emacs? Just
I've never come across anybody that uses Emacs, so I don't know how.
I don't have fingers long enough for the combination.
I got stuck in it once, and it took me about 5 minutes to get out of it.
Yes, yes, I know that. I know that feeling. But once I got stuck in Emacs, and on the process of like quitting it, I turned on music in the built-in music player, went to some website, and also opened the file manager that was filtered to videos. So that's that's some pretty awesome stuff. And I love how projects from long before, like it seems that projects that were written like 20, 30 years ago did much more stuff than the ones that are written now. That like, because when I look like at the new editors that come out like right now, for example, I installed the brackets like a week ago from Adobe. Adobe, I think it's probably, because I always say Adobe, but I know that's not correct. So um, I installed brackets, and it can't even replace in files, and I couldn't find a plugin for that. And I was thinking, like, there's this move to simplification going everywhere. So it's probably the developers are getting probably lazy writing that stuff. So Vim. How did you get started using Vim? Because that's I know people because my friends use Vim because it's cool. Because it's not uh, the stuff that everyone. I used Vim because I didn't have any other editor on the Linux box that I once got, and it didn't have connection to the internet. So, yeah, I had to fix stuff there. So I could either use Vim or Echo, and just echo lines one by one. So
Isn't Nano installed by default on
I
Debian?
well, it was kind of like 8 years ago, and the Linux was of some variety that you've never probably heard of because it's been like, but basically
Ubuntu 6?
someone did it, and yeah, and I had to fix it for a company that they didn't they required a small little change in like Apache file, and they just asked me to do it. And they just HTTP conf, and I had to learn Vim in the process of trying to save this thing. Um, so yeah, so the big reveal. I've been using Flash Develop, which is a great editor for ActionScript 3, and it can do a lot of ActionScript 3 type hinting and stuff. Why I've been using it, I don't know. It's just one day I was helping a friend, and he was like writing Flash stuff, and I just loved how it looked, and yeah. So the editor errors kind of always get past me. What about the rest of your like deployment environment on like at work? What do you guys use? Cause like, do you use continuous integration, all this stuff like automatic tests, builds, like whatever? Like what do you guys like? Cause there's been like this huge. Well, you're kind of part of it, like doing builder stuff, task runners. So there's a lot of these like meta tools that test your code, run analyzers, and enforce the PSRs and do stuff like that. So, uh, what would your perfect like deployment environment look like? Nginx versus Apache. Which do you like more?
Oh
Stuff
god.
like that.
I think Apache needs to die, or mod PHP needs to change completely. Nginx is quite a bit superior. That being said, I use Apache more than I use Nginx, which is a little sad. But I'm working on that. I'm slowly switching stuff over to Nginx right now. But as far as deployment goes, right now I'm using CodeShip instead of Travis.
I noticed on your
Yeah,
GitHub.
I found CodeShip pretty nice. I just wish that they supported pull requests for building pull requests more natively. They don't really right now. But in the past, I've used Jenkins, and as far as like a self-hosted build server, that's really the best one that's out there. Those are some new ones coming up. But yeah, I usually choose Ubuntu, Nginx, and lately I've been on PHP 5.4, but I may switch to 5.6 when it comes out, and it's available on the Ubuntu repository.
Actually, I stopped caring about PHP version after about like PHP 5.4, I think, like because whenever it's bigger than 5.4, it usually runs my code. So I kind of didn't. It's like PHP 6, alright, just as long as it runs PHP 5.4, I'm happy. So Mike, you.
We use Jenkins at work. Although I work for a pretty big company, so I'm reasonably far removed from implementation details on that. It's all Apache and Red Hat. As it was at the last company I worked for, though, similar drive to use Nginx. I've used it briefly. We found a significant performance benefit in just having processes handled properly using Nginx. But again, not something I've used a huge amount. So I did a lot of that before, but I'm very much focused on dev now, and it's up to the DevOps guys to get it out. We do integrate tests into our builds. If the tests don't pass, the code won't roll. We don't do style checks or anything like that. We have something of a guideline that people uh, are shown the URL to the wiki page, but and we all tend to code in very similar ways, but there's nothing enforced there to check.
So you
Yeah.
have your own standards? You said like there's a wiki page, so.
So there's just some simple stuff, nothing like PSR style things, but yeah.
Don't put 5 like enters in the one after another.
Yeah, Unix line endings, that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So a question then. Back to your projects then, because I kind of deviate. If you like could order pull requests, like if by chance a lot of people watch this and want to contribute, what would you like other people to do for your project? Because I've looked at the builder and it seems that you have, I think, like 4 blocks. You call those?
Yep.
Yeah, and they see they are, they kind of do most of the stuff that I can imagine, like, because they are, you have the file manager, watcher, you have like some shell exec stuff, just to execute commands. You have something else. Don't remember that. You can fit everything into this, because a person can always write a class and just call it from the command line using the command. But if if you could just like bang and add like a new piece of functionality to your project, what would that be?
The ability to run tasks like Task does. I'm not sure exactly how I would bake it in, but the ability to run short tasks like that would be useful, just like out of a task file. I'd want to figure out the best way to integrate it, but being able to do that with small things would be nice. And I'd also like a deploy block to be able to like run code on another server or something like that.
That would be nice. But running code on, so you basically like sort of like an SSH client, like by default, so you can just exec comments and just specify a server, something like that.
Yeah.
Just thinking, yeah. Mike, you?
Task sort of follows the grunt way of doing things, where Task itself doesn't really do very much, and the power's in the plugins. So I'm hoping that people like the idea, don't find a plugin that does what they want to, implement it and share it. So I guess it's plugins that I'm after, really, because I think that's where it becomes powerful. I think maybe that's where Grunt does well, in that you can find someone who's written some code that does what you want it to already, rather than having to spend a bunch of time doing it yourself.
So which plugin would you like?
It goes without saying that I definitely want the same thing for Builder. So.
Yeah. Which plugin would you like? Like any kind of size. So you apart from a plugin that you just turn your mic on and say the requirements and it builds the app for you. So if you could like get any plugin, imagine. Imagine that you get like a team of like 15 developers that are awesome for like 2 weeks, and they can develop any one single plugin for you.
Go ahead. I'll let you take that one first.
I don't know. I have no idea.
Something that you always wanted but never had the time to.
I think I'm hoping that something along the human lines might come out of it, sort of a template idea, not necessarily with projects, but maybe just on a file level. I've tried a few times with Vim to implement, a shortcut that will open an empty class file in the right PSR0 directory with a namespace and a class name in it and all that sort of stuff. It would be ace to have that sort of stuff so that you could have a task to run that would set up an empty class file for you, off the top of my head. It would also be very cool to see if some interesting asset building pipelines came out of it that did depart a little bit from how Node manages things, although you're sort of
Phones ring.
constrained around.
Oh, not anymore. Because I saw because it's rather loud, and no, not mind it. Sorry, because I saw just gonna be interrupting you with this noise. Sorry. Please continue.
I think that was it.
All right. So, Aaron, what would be the ideal plugin for you?
Honestly, anything that can go towards replacing Grunt. Not saying I want to kill Grunt, but I want something that can replace the necessity for installing Node and NPM on a server. So right now I do have the front end block that does things like uglify, minify. Actually, I don't know about uglifies, but there are a few things that are missing. Like right now, I haven't added the functionality to compile SAS or SCSS, but there's some functionality in there that's missing. There's also a couple other things that right now that the Luis Cordova guy that I was talking about earlier, he's working on a Gush extension, and being able to tie in other other command line applications in to like being able to run a task to like increment the version number, publish a release, and everything just in one command, I think would be awesome. But that would require environment variables, which I need to add. But I think between those two, the front end stuff, like completing the front end block and working on the Gush block, would be really nice.
All right. What about if your if your project reached like perfect awesomeness and it was like the best in the world? What would be the next project that you would embark on right now? Because I think it's easier for Aaron because you have a lot of projects anyway.
I'm actually working on this project right now as well.
All right. If you had none of those, like fresh start, you can do any project for like 3 months and without any distractions. Your girlfriend goes to like China for additional law studies. She doesn't even have internet to talk to you. So, what do you do that time?
I think I've been chucking an idea around recently. A lot of the stuff we do at work is interacting with. We're doing lots of B2B calls and interacting with lots of APIs. None of them are particularly nicely designed, and there's a lot of calls to make and a lot of data processing to do. And I've been trying to look at how, I'm tentative to say it, how concurrency might work with PHP, or how you might be able to perform several things at once at request time.
Threading?
Yeah. So that's pthreads is on the list, but something along that. Yeah, and just use Node sort of springs to mind. Yes, I'm chucking some ideas around with that. I'm hoping that'll be the next thing that comes along, is something that might achieve that in a nice way. I've no idea whether or not it's possible. Yeah.
That'd be nice. Well, you could still technically have like workers that just start them with like in the shell sort of thing that would just pick up independent parts of your of the task and just run those in parallel.
The initial bits of research would suggest that that's what people suggest. There's horrible stuff around making sub requests as well. Yeah, like I say. Maybe I don't know. I seem to be on this track at the minute. Find cool things in Node and figure out how to do them in PHP.
It seems like all the creative developers went into Node because like just hearing you guys, it sounds like wow. I'd copy this from Node and I'd copy that from Node. And it's just like let's just do a translation from JavaScript to PHP and run that.
I think the reason that my answer kind of tailored that way was because a lot of the front-end developers use JavaScript, so Node is kind of just a natural thing for them, which, I mean, it makes sense, but it would be nice, like I said, if Node wasn't a required dependency. I'm personally not a fan of JavaScript as server, but I'm fine with people that like it. I guess I don't really have a problem with it in that regard. But yeah.
Oh, all right. I think it might be a good time to be, heading towards the end right now because we kind of reached over the hour limit, and I kind of suspect people are not gonna watch past this limit anyway.
Yeah.
Because I've been getting complaints that in my last video I said like this is gonna be a short video and it took like 33 minutes. So, um, what would be like your something that you would just want to say about your project, more or less, sort of thing?
I'm accepting pull requests.
You need like this, like an arrow just to point. Oh, there was this hat thing. Oh, it's a pity I can't give you guys hats in Google Hangouts, but I'm just. There is no I request pull request heads, but there is this. So I'm just gonna use this. For the rest of the video,
Needs to be higher. That's there.
all right. So, what about you, Mike? What would you?
I would say that Builder is bad and that you shouldn't use it. No,
Fiber in it.
I guess I'm just trying to spread the word, get people interested. To be honest, it might well be worth sitting down with Aaron, having a bit of a chat, and seeing if there's a hybrid to be made, or seeing if what further inspiration could be taken, or yes. So, like I say, plugins is the thing. Make me some plugins. Use it. If they're cool, you get to push something to the Ace Task Packages vendor. Yes, that is that.
All right. Cool. Thanks. All right then. Thanks, guys, for coming. Because I actually thought that, when Mike started having troubles with connecting, I was like, no. Because I was positive that since I scheduled it to start like at midnight, like my time, it would just start regardless, like whether people are gonna be here or not. So thank God Google didn't do it like this, and I had this start broadcast button. So yeah, thanks a lot, guys, for talking. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, really.
Yeah.
There's a lot
Yeah,
of time. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for the interview.
Yeah, thanks. All right, bye, byes.
See you soon. Bye.
Yeah, bye.